All right. Hey guys, Sanj here. Welcome back to another episode. In today's episode, we're going to be doing the Olympia recap with my good friend NPC super heavyweight bodybuilder Ty Jordan. Now, in this specific video, we're going to be covering the men's open recap at the 2020 Mr. Olympia to include prejudging and finals. We're going to be talking about people like Chael Sung Lee and William Bonac and Juan Morel. All those guys are going to be covered, including Big Ramy, Phil Heath, Brandon Curry, all those guys. Everyone you can think about, we're going to be talking about. So I hope you guys enjoy this Olympia recap. I will see you guys at the end.
All right, man. Let's dive into the Olympia.
All right, we got the lighting figured out. Maybe not mine anymore. I look like a ghoul. But the Olympia, let's go with the Open. What was, and I know my predictions were horrible. Where did you see people landing in, and potentially who were your big surprises after, let's say, prejudging?
So I got to say, coming into it, man, I was extremely excited about the return of Phil Heath. I'm a big-time Phil Heath fan, and that's kind of the hybrid physique that I've always really kind of admired the most. The guys with the crazy shoulders and arms and just enough size to hang with the mass monsters, but just enough aesthetics to kind of remind you of some of the 90s guys. Very reminiscent of a Kevin Levrone, who's probably my favorite physique of all time.
Definitely.
So I definitely had Phil as my front runner coming into the show. I remember in 2018, obviously Phil was off the mark, but, he was still an absolute world beater from the back, a world beater from the side. And, we also have to keep in mind that outside of Sean Roden, he still beat everybody in that lineup with that physique, with the stomach flaws, and, having a fairly good understanding of Phil Heath's, level of pride and Phil Heath's mantra. I just didn't see Phil coming back at anything less than 100% with the level of scrutiny around his stomach and all of the eyes peeking in. So I was a bit surprised when he came out. And unfortunately, the stomach was still a bit of a problem. But ultimately, I think it's one of those self-fulfilling prophecies or destinies, if you will, where if we're all just hyper-focused on that stomach, then of course it's going to be the first thing that we look at when he comes out. But the thing I think that ultimately hurt him the most was somewhere along the way, I think the problems with the stomach has impacted the way that he's come to prepare his physique for these contests, because there was a slight decrease in the overall crispness, the overall level of density and hardness, and just the look to the muscle, whether it was a side chest shot, the back double bicep shot, two historically dominant shots for Phil. There was just a certain level of quality that was left to be desired that normally Phil just has in spades, So that was pretty disappointing. Another name that was a bit disappointing for me, William Bonac. He just doesn't seem to be bringing that level of pop that we had come to know from William that, I thought really made him, aside from Phil, really maybe just the only person that could stand toe-to-toe with Phil in the overall muscle quality, density, and shape department. But I think, unfortunately, William Bonac has seen his best days. So, we saw his physique slip.
Okay.
And you know what? Brandon's physique really surprised me in a few ways. It looked to me that they were solely prepared for Phil Heath, and that they came to battle with Phil's telltale quality and crispness and overall hardness and density factor. But I think that unfortunately kind of backfired on Brandon, and not coming in traditionally big and full and round that we like him to. I think it exposed his flaws a bit further. I think those legs, while they might have come up on paper, I thought the disparity between his upper body and his lower body was actually a bit greater this year, because I think he tried to come in for that conditioning, and I think it just left him a little bit flat.
Yep.
But the other thing, too, is I think to a degree he probably has the same issue that Juan Morel has, where the upper body just simply grows a little bit faster than the lower body. And I felt like Brandon's lats and his chest and everything grew more this year. And I thought it just threw the balance off even more. And it was hard to ignore particularly from the rear. You know, particularly from the rear, it was just really hard to overlook the slightness of the hamstrings and the silhouette, and just the overwhelming Y frame that Brandon brings, which is very 70s-esque, but it's just not what we've come to expect from the modern bodybuilding circuit now.
Okay. Well, you cut the workout for me, so I'm going to have to dissect all that. So let's go back to Phil. I definitely can see what you're talking about with the midsection. I know some other bodybuilding journalists or pundits, like you said, were talking about how he was almost like touching it and hiding it. Definitely when in prejudging, as that's what I wanted to focus on right now, I could definitely tell that he wasn't as sharp. I definitely didn't notice the levels of feathering and like deep cuts that we're traditionally used to with Phil. And I also could agree that I thought that he wasn't as round, and the muscle didn't pop as much, especially from the back double. I feel like it looked like he almost didn't really open up as much.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, just being off that 5 to 10%, unfortunately for a physique like Phil's, it stands out a lot, because I think we all know that structurally Phil is not the most dominant physique up there. And, you know, quality with some of these guys does tend to wither a bit with age. So, unfortunately, he simply just couldn't afford to come in off the mark in some of the trademark attributes that we've come to know Phil for. And that really just kind of did him in. You know, I still think if he would have been head and shoulders in front of everybody in the back double bicep, in the side chest, and in the most muscular, those are the three poses that we have come to expect Phil to be a world beater in. I still think if he slams the door definitively in all three of those shots, we're looking at Phil Heath, 8-time Mr. Olympia, but he didn't slam the door on any of those shots. Big Ramy, in my opinion, definitively took him on the side chest. I still think Phil won the back double bicep, but only by a slim margin. And the next person up was probably William Bonac, who wasn't even in the conversation. And then, you know, in the most muscular, I probably have Phil third to both Brandon and Ramy. You know,
Okay.
I wasn't crazy about some of the variations Phil was going with. I felt like a couple of them actually highlighted his stomach and his less than ideal structure. You know, I think he should have just probably stuck with the hands clasped and the crab shot.
Yep.
And, you know, Phil giving up just 5 to 10% in those trademark shots really just left the door wide open for everybody.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I can't agree more with the most muscular variations. I definitely noticed that. You noticed, or you mentioned that you thought that William Bonac's best years were behind him. Now William is historically known for doing very well at the Arnold Classics. That seems to be his show is the Ohio. But we also have to keep in mind that he did place second at the Mr. Olympia. So I don't think it's a stretch in any imagination to say that his best years are behind him, especially when we have bigger, younger competitors really coming up in the ranks. And Big Ramy also, I was definitely wrong with him. I've always assumed that people are going to bring the best package, and with Ramy, I've been burnt probably for 2 years now in a row.
Yeah.
It is just like. And I even with Dexter Jackson, I didn't want to put him in the top 6, but I did. Ramy definitely surprised me. I know in my Olympia recap, I even talked about how like I cried a little bit when he won, which was surprising for me because I didn't even know I was rooting for him until they said he won. I was like, oh, I wanted that to happen.
Yeah, you know, I had honestly felt like the ship had sailed for Ramy just like you did. You know, it's been a tumultuous last 2 years for him. And, you know, I was aware of the fact that he'd actually hooked up with Chad Nichols well before this year's Arnold. And for them to have missed the mark at the Arnold, I thought, well, shit, you know, he's had Chad in his corner since 2018 and they failed to deliver. So it really is over for this guy. You know, I don't know how it is, but it just seems to be the case. And he really took it upon himself to surprise every single one of us out there. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to listen to any of the post-Olympia wrap-up interviews that Chad has done, but, I'm really impressed at the way he was able to just, take Ramy backwards before really pulling him forward. They corrected a lot of the mistakes that I think they made with him over in Kuwait, particularly with the way they've gone about, you know, training his legs, so to speak. Some of the ancillary stuff they were doing with his legs that cleaned up a lot of that. Reintroduced a lot of separation that we've been longing for in Ramy's legs.
Yep.
Crispness and detail that we'd never seen before. And again, they talked about he suffered in a way that he simply had just never suffered before. And to take a guy that big and really suck him down the way they did, it brought out a level of quality that we've never seen. And, my ultimate thoughts on the direction of this year's Olympia and Big Ramy winning is I think it's great for the Olympia brand, Josh. I think Classic Physique has really, really dug out a niche and is just continuing to grow and grow in popularity and defining
Yep.
and they really know what they're after now. And because they've defined themselves as such, I think it's really important that the Olympia gets back to, the direction that we've already gone down with the advent of some of our freaks like Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman. And that's not to say that everything about those eras need to carry forth into 2021. I think it's fantastic that the IFBB has finally got a handle on the stomachs and the guts and the things like that. But I don't think there was a lot of collective excitement the past 2 years with the physique like Brandon Curry or a physique like Sean Roden winning the Olympia. And because we have this classic physique division that has really highlighted, what we've come to think is maybe some of the most beautiful and aesthetic times of the bodybuilding history and transplanted that into the 2020 and 2021 era, I think that really gives open bodybuilding the green light to really just go back down the freak route and, really have two separate brands as opposed to two classes that really piggyback off of one another. I think contrast is important. I think it brings a lot of interest to the sport. And even for, say, someone like you that admires aesthetics and prefers a shapely or rounder physique, there's no denying that what the fuck factor is going to keep you interested and keep you coming back and wondering, are we in store for another 7, 8, year reign? I just think it's a great direction for the sport. And obviously the judges can simply they've got to judge what's in front of them. I don't think there was any politics behind Big Ramy winning in the direction that we're now going in, but I think it is fantastic for the sport. I myself was not excited about the Sean Roden and Brandon Curry wins because, those physiques simply don't transcend time. Those physiques aren't better physiques than what we've seen in the past. And like any sport, we want to see evolution. We want to see development. Is Big Ramy better than Dorian Yates or Ramy? No, probably not. But at least that's an athlete that's headed in the road of evolution and something maybe we've never seen before. Those 36-inch quads that Ramy has, we've never seen anything like that before.
Yeah.
I
think that's a good point. I've never thought of it like that, where the Olympia as a brand wants to go with something they haven't seen before. You look at someone like William Bonac or Hadi Chupin, we mentioned earlier. It's like, yes, they have very big physiques. They have world-class physiques, but, is that something we haven't seen before? You look at the 212 class, and that's for the most part, that's exactly what the 212 is. Smaller, shorter, somewhat blockier fellas with physiques. A lot of them look similar, but there is a lot of difference. So I think that it's a good point to mention that the Olympia needs to let the Mr. Olympia step into his own and be different from the classic physique.
Yeah, and without drawing obvious parallels to the performance enhancement side of things, you
Sure.
think baseball, after, what they call the steroid era or the home run era, where, it was commonplace to see guys like Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, hit 60, 70, 80 home runs per year. Baseball took a major hit once they took it back to 35, 40, 45 home runs per year. And, I think on that like similar notion, I don't think it really did a whole lot for the overall growth and development of bodybuilding to have a physique like Sean Roden or a physique like Brandon Curry win our most coveted title, when in all actuality, those are physiques that in the grandest years of bodybuilding, might have placed 7th, 8th, 9th place.
Sure.
That's backwards evolution for the sport. And it's not going to do anything to grow it from a fan perspective, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Already got 2 divisions where people who maybe are looking for a more attainable, aesthetically flowing, admirable physique can look towards.
Yes.
We've already got those boxes ticked. So, I think it's important to have that what the fuck factor involved. Bodybuilding is one of those interesting sports, and open bodybuilding in particular, where you've got a massive slew of fans that have absolutely nothing to do with fitness, weight training. They're just a fan of these freaks because they remind them of action heroes or comic book characters or things they grew up with as children. And none of the other divisions really offer that component. And I think it's important that we play into that with the open bodybuilding.
That's great. Yeah, it's kind of cool. You're pointing out a lot of things I haven't thought of before. So interesting perspective.
Yeah.
So that's open. What did I miss? We talked about, yeah.
212 or Classic. I think it was a hell of a show in both divisions.
Oh yeah. I was just thinking within the open, they had, I can't remember where they had Phil placing at finals, but they had Hottie placing second at finals behind Rami, I believe.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting to see. Unfortunately, he just couldn't make up the ground.
Yeah, and you know what? You're absolutely right. Unfortunately, he was just off the mark on Friday, and it seems like Hottie suffers from a certain aspect that not a lot of other guys are getting unfairly judged like he is, in that everyone talks about Hottie's absolute best, which, was debatably Vancouver, also debatably last year's prejudging at the Olympia. And it seems like those 2 looks are still so fresh in people's heads that the second he came out on Friday and he didn't immediately hit those notes, it was like the entire bodybuilding collective completely wrote him off, which was unfortunately pretty unfair for him because he still looked great on Friday. He was maybe off just a hair, maybe 2 or 3%, but Saturday night I had absolutely zero problem with him coming in second place. And you know what, when they stood him next to Rami, that was a very interesting comparison. They've got a lot of
I love
similar,
that.
in the big billowing quads, but even with Rami's improved separation, Hottie still killed him. And the quality and the separation factor from the front in those quadriceps.
Yeah.
And, Hottie's got a lot of quality from the back too. A lot of people act like he doesn't have a world-class back double bicep, but I think both of Hottie's back poses are very, very competitive. And, had he brought that physique on Saturday to Friday night, I think you're looking at second place, no doubt. I think Brandon's grab on second place was very loose at best. And something from judging I want to talk about, I'm wondering if you noticed this too, but it was my opinion that Brandon's case for a return to the first place spot of Mr. Olympia was pretty much dashed the moment he stood next to Akeem Williams in prejudging.
The size, yeah.
For him, the second I saw it, because I'm looking at those 2 guys standing at the edge of the call, and I'm like, holy shit, they're like the same bodybuilder. Both of them have these incredible silhouettes with crazy flaring lats and good quad sweep and massive arms. But physique Akeem was completely outsizing Brandon. Akeem's hardness, separation, and overall muscle quality was completely outclassing Brandon, in my opinion. And really, the only place that I think Brandon had Akeem on was just his overall genetics from the back. Akeem's got those highly inserted lats, take it or leave it, but, leave something to be desired in his back shots.
Mm-hmm.
But both have that similar issue, too, from the rear with the thicker skin and the lack of apparent muscle quality in the lower half. But Akeem has seemingly rectified that. Akeem gets really hard from the rear now. His side leg is right there with Ramy. It's maybe the most impressive
Yeah.
side leg in the whole show. And again, I just felt like it was over for Brandon the second they sit next to each other, because structurally very similar, shape very similar. And, at the end of the day, this is a bodybuilding show. Size matters.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way to ignore the fact that Akeem was blowing Brandon out from below the waist with the quadriceps and just the overall hardness of the physique.
Mm. Yeah, you're right. I guess I didn't get a good look at Akeem during the show, but after the show, when I looked at the photos, I felt so bad for being critical of him, because just the hardness that he brought, the level of conditioning, I didn't see in the live stream, and maybe I wasn't looking as hard as I should have. But the photos after the show were, I mean, they were insane. So I was very happy to see that he got that good placing.
He brought a very similar package, I felt like, to the Arnold Classic this year. And, unfortunately, he faded a bit and he didn't get the placing that I felt like he might have deserved. But, long time coming for that guy. A lot of hard-fought shows, a lot of second places. He's had to put up with a lot of negativity and people talking about, is he ever going to get in shape? Is he ever going to get that skin thin? And, I feel like he has finally turned the corner. And that is a physique that, hell, it could potentially challenge Ramy here in a few years, because there's not a ton of guys coming up that I think really have an opportunity to present an honest challenge to Big Ramy. I don't know if you want to go over it or not, but if you really just look at, that second and third call out groups, I don't see a lot of guys from those groupings that have a chance to stand with Ramy in the next few years. I really don't.
Yeah, definitely not in the next few. Yeah, I think that the Chael Soon Lee, I love his physique. I think, yeah, I think he has a big future coming up in the open class.
When his physique gets a certain level of polish that it's just kind of missing right now, we'll be able to really appreciate everything about him, because it's not like he's not in shape. It's not like he's not lean. There's just a certain crispness and quality that he's not yet come across yet, but it's there for him.
Yep. And if you look back, I did an athlete spotlight for him when he was the Mr. Universe in NABA. I think it was 3 years in a row. I mean, he was just diced. He looked really good. So historically, he has brought that level of conditioning.
Putting on a lot of that new muscle quickly, it takes a little bit of time for the conditioning factor to catch up, the muscle maturity, things like that.
Yeah, he's definitely put on some new muscle, especially since or from the Japan Pro in 2019 when it was Cedric and Regan.
Yeah,
I
remember.
He was in there. He was in that first call out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I look forward to seeing him. I want to move on to the other classes, but I wanted to get your opinion on Juan Morel. So he won the Brazil Pro, and I thought that was a really close call with him and Rafael Brandao. Another guy that I love. His physique flows very well. That's my kind. That's my kind of bodybuilder. But then, he had a crazy year with his business, with the cookie business. He didn't really bring that wow factor. I thought his legs looked undersized. The conditioning was off. So, him placing last wasn't it wasn't a stretch, but it definitely was interesting to see.
So my thoughts on that can essentially just be summed up in, man, to be a full-time bodybuilder, you really have to be a full-time bodybuilder. And I think what we saw there was simply Juan Morel's focus being in a ton of different directions. And, props to him. I mean, I think that's I want to say just 2 years ago, I remember when the My Cookie Dealer business just started, and it was kind of a novel thing, and a lot of bodybuilders were putting in, you know, their one-time orders just to be nice and supportive. And here he is 2 years later, showing up all over the New York City local news. He's doing collab products with a whole host of different vendors in New York City. I think they're probably pumping out 20 to 30,000 cookies per day. So I think his focus is exactly where it needs to be. So props to him for doing that alongside his wife. But unfortunately, again, to be a full-time bodybuilder, you've got to be all in 100%. And I think what we saw was just a bodybuilder whose focus was in a lot of other directions.
Yep. And that's not us negatively criticizing him. That's just, it is what it is,
Yeah, facts. But another thing too is, I think Juan is slowly starting to get up there in age. He's got a really young, healthy look to him, but there's no denying the fact that Juan is getting closer to 40 years old. Juan has always struggled to bring big, full legs that can keep up with his crazy, crazy round delts and big, full chest and arms. And I think we saw that further exacerbated by, again, his lack of focus, getting up there in age a little bit, and probably just 2020 thrown into the mix too. Just crazy year. Probably spending some time outside of the gym. I think ultimately that led to Juan taking that last place.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we get to see him in 2021. There's hopefully we get to see shows like the Puerto Rico Pro come back. Maybe he'll come back to Brazil and defend that title. And that will do it for the part 2 of this interview / Olympia recap with NPC super heavyweight bodybuilder Ty Jordan. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode on the Bodybuilding News Network. Make sure you guys are subscribed to both Sanch Bodybuilding and the Bodybuilding News Network, as we will be transitioning from content to content depending on what we're talking about. Like the video if you enjoyed this specific style of content, and I'll see you guys in part 3.